Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so much for chiming in today. We have a wonderful guest joining us. She just reminded me our last time we were together, we spent 4 hours talking to each other. So I'm going to have to really behave myself today. So Vandana Puranik, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Well, you know what? You and I are never short of words. So we'll have to pay attention, but I want to give our audience just a little bit of background on you so they understand why, one, I invited you to the show, but two, I just want them to feel my passion for you because, we've met a few times now and every time I've learned like so much. So I'm excited for you to share with our audience as well. So audience, let me give you a little bit of background on Vandana. She is a thinkfluencer. She's an idea architect, community builder, TEDx and international speaker, best-selling author, brand builder, and the founder of What She Said. This woman has like more ideas than I can tell you. And that's her whole thing is she's all about launching ideas and then actually building them. She's the CEO of a company called Active Ingredients because she believes life is about making choices and connections. And Active Ingredient is about creating those choices and those connections, ultimately leading to great decisions with impeccable execution. So I know you do a gazillion things and we won't possibly be able to cover everything today, but I do want to give our audience, give them an opportunity to meet you and fall in love with you just like I did. So maybe Wanda, let's start out with, tell us why you do what you do, because like I see you firsthand what you're doing and creating.
So there's a couple of things. I'm a marketer and strategist by profession, had been doing it for about 25, 30 years. I'd done the corporate and consulting thing and the freelance thing. And then I got bored and it only took me 25 years.
Just a small amount of time.
Well, what happened was I was just starting to see the same stuff and the same issues come up over and over again. And in all the businesses that I've worked in. And what amazed me was the human capacity to brilliantly solve the wrong problems. And it drives me crazy. So I'm on a quest to change that. So I teach about solving the impossible. And that has been the fire under me that's just kind of blossomed everywhere. And the other thing that I launched recently was a group called What She Said. And it's all about building women. Both the business that she's in, but also the woman behind the business. And when I say business, it could be philanthropy. It could be, her art. It could be business as in the traditional business sense, whatever it might be, corporate entrepreneurship. But we have an amazing group of women that are the essence of every human being in that group is just so beautiful, and so whole, And I did because of an issue that kind of came to the forefront very recently. In the last year, I would say. I always wanted to do something for women because I think they're the most underutilized resource that the world has. And we all know that when women rise, society rises.
No kidding.
So I really want to build on that. And what had happened was when our two older kids were really young. He was 6 and she was 7, and he was having behavioral issues. So his teacher said, yeah, that makes sense because he's testing at a high school level for math and university level for reading comprehension. But we were kind of stunned because she's exactly the same. So we didn't know any better. We didn't know that there was any difference in them versus other kids in any way, really, because they do a lot of dumb things, let's be honest. And they do a lot of great things. And so we had them tested, and the psychologist comes back and he says, I can count on one hand kids as bright as yours. And I think we went into shock after that, because it's not, it was, first of all, you have to really understand what piece by piece, what that means. And then, and internalize it. And then you think like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then you go into this place where you're petrified, because what do you do with that? Right.
Yeah.
So he said, what are you going to do for your son? And we said, this is awesome. We finally have a piece of paper that says he needs to be on a special track, getting in a program that's right for him. Higher, lower, doesn't matter. And he said, what are you going to do for your daughter? And we said, you know what? She creates happiness. She's amazing. She's doing really well. She has lots of friends. She finds, solutions to things. She's diplomatic, all of that. So why try to fix something that ain't broke? And he turns around and says to us, that's exactly why you need to push for her, because this is what happens to women and girls all the time. Mm-hmm. And so that has really, that has accelerated my desire to do something for women. And it was like, just like it sort of came surging to the forefront after a really striking experience that I had. So it was just one of those things that I just felt a need to act on. So I interviewed about, 200 women and globally, and figured out what they wanted and how we're going to be unique, and made it happen.
I love it. I love it. And I've had the privilege of meeting some of those women, and they are badass and amazing women lifting others up, which I think that's also a big part, is like, how do you lift each other? How do you lift yourself? It's such an important mission. And what you just shared about your daughter, yeah, we see that all the time. And in the school system, we see it all the time, right? Yeah. And not that anybody's intentionally trying to separate or put girls down or not push girls. It's just been sort of the cultures and the environments that have continued to multiply in every aspect of our lives.
And I think if you look at it stereotypically, it's generally the boys who have behavioral issues and who lash out and who, and this is very, very, I'm generalizing, but it's usually the girls who find the solutions. Mm-hmm. And so, that's just who we are innately. As male and female, right?
Well, I think that's a great point that you bring up. And it reminded me of a conversation I had with this woman. She is a counselor, and her practice is all about neurodivergency, right? And one of the things she described to me, because she shared with me that I had my son tested. He's definitely ADHD. Then my daughter said, well, I'm pretty sure I am too. I want to be tested. And then the results came back and said, yes, she's ADHD. And I said to Christina, who, by the way, she did a podcast with me I think it was last fall. Anyway, I said, what is going on? I said, we have an epidemic. And I said, now I'm going, really? Is this like just the new buzzwords? Like every kid has ADHD. And she goes, well, truth be known, you probably have it as well, Vicki. And that's where they get it from. And I went, oh, okay. But what was interesting, Vandana, what you just shared, she made that comment. She said, girls often go undiagnosed in total or until they're much older in life, because the boys are so disruptive in the classrooms, and the girls have learned how to problem solve and sit there and be quiet, and they don't want the teacher getting upset with them. And so there's this difference in how we treat each of them. And anyway, she had sent me a bunch of information, and she said, you really need to understand what's happening and how it shows up differently in girls than how it shows up in boys. And I was blown away, because I would have never thought that, but exactly what you just said, it's so true. And the girls are sitting back and quietly solving the issues.
Yeah. And the thing is that if we hadn't gone through that experience, I don't know that it would have been highlighted to me as clearly either. And certainly not from somebody who has so much authority, like who really is, well entrenched in their field and so knowledgeable. This is a gentleman who had been practicing for 30 years and was the head of the department for the school board. So he's seen a lot of kids. So when he says it, you tend to believe it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, he's had many examples and different ways that it shows up, to your point. So let's talk a little bit about this problem solving and possibility thinking, because you said something when you first started talking, I find very interesting, about how we work so hard to solve the wrong problems.
yeah.
and we certainly are seeing that all
Yeah.
around us right
Yeah.
now in our world. And so maybe just talk a little bit about that. Like, what are the things that the patterns or the themes that you've seen through the years of people, always going to the wrong, the
Yeah.
wrong problem to solve?
So there's, okay, so that could be a really long conversation.
I know.
I'm actually writing a book about it, which is almost launched. The main issue is that when we go to solve something, all we look at is the problem. So we become very problem centric, and what happens is, when you're like that, you become cognitively rigid. And so when there's great stuff, new information coming in, you can't absorb it. You can't receive it because you're so focused. We talk about focus being a good thing. This is when focus is not necessarily a good thing, or at least
Great
focusing
point.
on the wrong stuff, but you don't know that it's the wrong thing. But it's not until we actually stop ourselves and ask, am I actually solving the right problem?
Yeah.
Like, how do I know it's the right problem? How do I know it's not related to something else? How do I know it's not dependent on something else? How do I know that, it's actually something that I'm, that's visible? And what about all the stuff that's invisible? There's so many questions. And so one of the principles that I talk about is solving for the outcome and not the problem. And you change, your view. Like, let's say, you're a gardener and you have this beautiful garden, and but you're picking weeds every day because they're the most annoying things in the world. So you pick the weeds, and guess what? There's more the next day because you're just giving them a chance to grow. It's like, when you shave, it's like the hair comes back quicker and, more with a vengeance. And it's the same thing. The weeds come back the same way. So what you're doing is you're actually trying to nip, the problem, but you haven't really solved for the outcome.
Okay.
If the outcome is getting rid of weeds, what would you do differently?
Yeah.
Right. So that's just a simple example, but even that, it happens, and it's not just in business, it happens in life.
Everywhere. Yeah.
So one of the principles I talk about is solving for the outcome. And to me, start nothing until you're solving for the outcome.
Yeah.
Whatever that goal is that you have. So that's a big deal.
Yeah. I think that's huge. And I think that's an important, everyone listening to the podcast, really challenging yourselves to look at what is the outcome you're trying to get, because I see this all the time too. Actually, I just had a client on a call and we were talking about something very similar, because her leader couldn't get past what was right in front of him. He couldn't see anything else that was happening. And that's kind of human nature, unless you exercise that part of your brain to think more from a curiosity perspective. And I think that's what attracted you and I to each other, because we're both very curious people, and we're always asking different questions. And like that, just to me, that makes life richer, right? Than getting so fixed.
It's interesting, because the second principle that I actually talk about, and I know we didn't set this up, but is about curiosity, about always suspending yourself in a state of curiosity, because and people don't realize this, but it's actually a strategic move.
Oh, for sure.
Like nobody thinks about it that way, but it is. And the thing is when you're curious, you're looking at everything through, childlike wonder, or like Einstein, or, people who just were so open-minded, they were open to receiving. And I remember, first of all, I made a conscious decision to switch my thinking patterns to curiosity above anything else. And it completely changed my life a number of years ago. And I truly, sincerely mean that. It really changed my life, because even in really tough cases, let's say you and I are in a conflict, for example, and we're in different, we're never going to meet in the middle. Most people will say, okay, let's agree to disagree. Where does that get you? Like that doesn't
nowhere
move you forward.
Yeah, nowhere.
But if I say to you, you know what, tell me how you got there, because I'm really curious, because I didn't get to the same place that you did. So I want to know what sparked that in you. And I want to know how you got to where you got. So it's just, it's one of those things that I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
And, it has, I have no expectations, because I'm just going to be curious. I don't get angry because I'm going to be curious, so it's really changed my life quite a bit.
Yeah. But there's also such a ripple effect on the other person as well that you're having conversation with, right?
Yeah.
Like this was kind of what my conversation was a few minutes ago with my client, because I also practice a lot with my executives on asking questions, moving from telling people what to do into that place of curiosity, getting them to really expand on their critical thinking. But you're also putting the responsibility on them to unpack and really think about, like, how did you come to that? Like, what prompted that? Right. And that comes from all sorts of places, our experiences, our mood at the moment. Right. But that curiosity, what you're saying, Vandana, is, I think that's such a critical component to life, because you're right. It's less stress. You don't have expectation, but it just opens. It opens up a whole new dialogue.
The other thing too is that, as you were saying, in that conflict situation, all of a sudden we move from an adversarial position to a collaborative or an understanding, and how we can, and then we actually move forward.
That's right.
Because, agreeing to disagree I don't know why we say that. It's just one of those things that's easy to say, I think.
It's because people want to stand on their position.
Yeah.
That's usually the biggest reason, right? I want to be right. And so I'm going to stand on my position here, and I'm not going to be open. So we'll just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So your book is in the process of being written, and
almost there.
Okay. Like, do we have a timeline?
April.
April. Oh my, you are getting there. Okay. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
And this is not new for you. I think this will be your 8th book that you've written.
Yeah. I mean, now it's up to 10, but yeah.
Wow. Okay. I've lost, I've lost 2 full books.
I think I am actually a bit ADD or something like that, because, I just, oh my God, such a great idea. Let's go do it. That kind of thing. So curiosity can sometimes really, it really did kill the cat sometimes.
But you exercise your brain to the fullest capacity, right? Because I remember when we met, and forgive me, I can't remember the name of the book, but you were telling me about this one book that you'd written about Hollywood.
Yeah.
And it was like so totally different than other things you had done. So talk about that a little bit. Like, what prompts your mind, your brain, to go in these different directions?
I think a couple of things. One is things that have the ability, 3 things, have the ability to change the way we do things, and that we can, it's just a way to help people, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and we don't realize the impact. And I want to be able to share stuff that I have learned through my experience and research, to say, maybe you need to try it this way, because if you want the power to solve everything and the impossible, and you don't know where to begin, or you're having a tough time figuring out what to do because you're so stuck, go here. So number one, I'm always my intentions are always about being educational and engaging. So those 2 things. The next thing is I am fascinated by things that are absurd, and how they affect us. And the third thing is I think that there's so much in this world that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And the counterintuitive part is actually the right part, if you want to call it that. We don't realize like how much the counterintuitive actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So we kind of just go with, what we've been taught or what we think is right. And all of a sudden, oh my God, the opposite is actually better, So that's just the way I think. And if there's a way to share what I'm doing, then I'm so grateful to be able to do so.
Oh,
Even
I
the
love
Hollywood
it.
stuff, I'm fascinated by history, but that book it's not about the Hollywood history that you think about.
Yeah.
It's not boring. Let me tell you, the way it starts out. And I think I shared this with you. And I don't have to share it now because you can read the book when it comes out,
There you go.
but it's a really fascinating, eye-opening journey. And it's written very much like in the style of investigative journalism. So every book is different. Every book is written in a different sort of mode.
Okay.
That one is investigative journalism. So really trying to get at the bottom of what's actually we're discovering.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that plays into your curiosity as well, right? So it's not just one dimensional curiosity. You are really, really exercising that on a number of different domains. I'll use that language to, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'll shift gears just a little bit because I think one of the things that just blew my mind when I met you is the fact that you have written now 10 books, but also you're a survivor of cancer, and you spent some time in a coma.
Mm-hmm.
And, thank you for allowing me to talk about that and allow you to talk about that on the show today. Because that's a life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really love you to share like what happened and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah. So I was doing all this great stuff in terms of, okay, I'm on this quest to, change the way people think. And I want us to be smarter thinkers and better decision makers, and swifter decision makers. I want us to have wisdom. So I built a model that is self-perpetuating and everlasting about how to, receive or go through success over and over and over again. It's not an end game. And, because quite frankly, I was asked, like, how did you become so successful? They don't even know how successful I was or wasn't, but what was that turning point in your life that made you so successful? And I was like, yeah, I got nothing. But then I thought, like, it's actually, a culmination of all the little pieces that have influenced your life and that you've gone through, that got you to where you are today. But, the one point that I said to them is like, you know what? I would hate to think that I have arrived, because that to me is really depressing. So that's why I'm saying, and I've built this model about perpetual success. Like, how do you go through it? So I did that, did an anthology put it in an anthology, and that went on to become a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. And then I ended up speaking, to Harvard and Stanford and Cambridge and Oxford and all those good stuff, all the name dropping I can get in there. And I'm joking, but it's the reality. But I was working on about 5 books at the time. And I felt a darkness coming at me for about 6 months. And it was very unsettling because you think you're imagining things, and you don't necessarily, like, I always second guess myself instead of just believing in myself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so 6 months in to that sort of darkness, that feeling of darkness, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was almost a relief, because it's like, oh, okay, that's what this is. Okay, now I can move forward. So it's like, you need a decision so you can move forward, right? And so so I was still traveling and speaking and doing everything. I'd come back and get diagnosed, biopsy, come back, and then go back and have surgery. And, like, it's just, I just, like, it's just part of life, and I just have to move through it. And then we got to the point of the pathology reports after my surgery. And this is where things are, for example, really counterintuitive. I was on the cusp of whether chemo would make sense or not, whether it would help or not. And if you talk to all the medical specialists, everybody says you don't need it, because the latest research is saying that people in your category chemo is not really going to be helpful. But I was on the cusp of that category.
Okay.
So in terms of my scores. And then I researched it for about 2 weeks. I talked to so many people around the world, really knowledgeable people. And at the end of the day, I decided to go ahead with chemo because here's the counterintuitive part. Normally you'd go with the most latest research, but it's the older research that said do not discount chemo, that had stats on longevity.
Mm.
So the most recent research is only 5 years, whereas older research is, it keeps going. It gets deeper and deeper as you go forward. So decided to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, and talked to my surgeon, and he was kind of in the same boat. So went through that. As soon as I started chemo, a week or two later, I lost all my hair. And then I started losing weight to the tune of 10 pounds a week. So it was very dangerous.
Wow.
I just couldn't, everything. I mean, I kid you not, I was at the stage where I was salting pizza because it had no flavor. It just tasted like cardboard. So
wow.
It's like, it was so horrible what I couldn't eat. Anyway, so I had no glucose going in my brain. Very little, which you need, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then I started having trouble breathing. And I thought, oh, this is all part of chemo. Once I'm through chemo, because I'm not a complainer. I don't complain about anything. And so once I'm over this hump, I'll kind of rejig
through it.
Right? I was wrong. So what happened was one of my teeth got infected. It had a crack in it and got infected. And you can't have an infection when you have chemo and cancer. So off to the ER we went. When I saw, the head of the department, immediately things happened like crazy. It was so fast. Wow. I was in a bed. I was, they changed me into a gown. And I'm like, what's happening here? I thought I was just going to come in for antibiotics and maybe a little bit of oxygen kind of thing, just kind of a one-hit thing. And anyway, then they started IVs and antibiotics. And I was like, what is happening?
Somebody talk to me here. I need to know what's...
and the thing is like, I had been waiting for 7 hours and nobody had done anything. So it's like,
wow.
It was so totally the opposite of what had happened, for the previous few hours. So it was very confusing. Anyway, so they tried to put an oxygen mask on me and it was too tight and I already couldn't breathe. So it freaked me out. So I threw it off. And after that, I don't remember anything. And I ended up being admitted. I was talking and giving consents like they were going out of style. I have no idea what I was eating. I had tons of friends coming to visit, no recollection of anything. And they cured the infection, which was awesome. This is where you're solving the problem, but you're not actually getting to the outcome. Mm-hmm. So they solved the problem, and I got worse and worse and worse until they had no choice but to put me in a coma.
Wow.
And when I say coma, I was intubated. I was on a ventilator because I wasn't getting enough oxygen. This is once again to my brain. I was not getting enough oxygen. So the fact that I'm actually coherent and the same level of intelligence, like that nothing changed, is remarkable.
I was just going to say a miracle, actually.
No glucose and no oxygen. That's really scary. Anyway, so I was intubated. I was on a ventilator. My hands were tied to the railings. My feet were bandaged. My eyes were taped shut. I was paralyzed. I had about 10 IVs going from my neck all the way to my wrist. I mean, I was in a serious coma. And my poor family had to go through all of this. But death never sort of entered what I saw in my coma, nor did it ever enter my husband's, mind. And he was incredible. For a guy who, is expert in financials, becoming in 2 weeks, wondering if, people wondering if he was a doctor. Like it shows you it's all about asking the right questions, right? Anyway, I have to tell you though, I had the best coma ever. It was so good. And I say this and I was flying like Superman. to different galaxies and realms and ending up in places just watching. I was a fly on the wall. I wasn't actually participating in anything. But what was amazing is that I saw so many things that were humanly possible, but not done yet. So this notion of discovery was really critical for me. And, getting back to my curiosity, I'm unapologetic about my curiosity, and it kind of tied into all that. And I kind of feel like that innately just came out. Anyway, I was in a coma for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Had I been in a coma the next day, I would have had to have had a tracheostomy. So, and thank God I came out. Thank God I failed my first breathing test when I was in the coma, and then I passed the next two. So they said, okay, we're going to give it a shot and take her out.
Wow.
Take her off. And so then I was in the hospital for 2 months, on oxygen, etc. And in rehab as well. And 3 days after I came out of the hospital, I did my TEDx talk.
I remember you telling me that, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. And I would not advise that for anyone.
Yeah.
Certainly don't be in a coma at all.
Yeah.
But if you do, don't do your TEDx talk 3 days after you come out of the hospital. And it was great. But what happened was I used my own case in the ICU about the principles that I teach. And the three, three of the main principles that I teach. And it was an amazing experience. But what it did is it highlighted a number of things for me. Number one is all we have is now. Yeah. Number two is make sure you think big. I thought I was thinking big. Man, I had no idea what big was until I went through that experience. Put yourself first. I never did. And as women, we often don't. We're more givers than we are, putting ourselves in that position. So I have really started to do that. It also, the story about my kids that I told you came rushing forward, and put me into, action about my cause for women. I think it made me ready to receive. I had never ever been that way before. And it's a really beautiful feeling to be open to receiving. And if you're really honest with yourself, you have to evaluate, like, am I actually open to receiving, or am I like, okay, I know what I'm doing and my mind's made up, or, I don't need help, or, I can move through this. Sometimes we, in this notion of being a strong person, we forget to receive.
I was just going to say that, Vandana. I think that what you just highlighted there is so pivotal for so many of us, right? Me included in that, like because we've gone from this extreme of be humble, don't brag, raise your kids, stay home, to no, we can have it all. We can do all these things, and doing all those things, then we forget about ourselves and to receive. And I think that's such an incredible lesson to share with people, and really think about why we position ourselves in a place to not receive. Like, what are we trying to protect by not receiving?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talked about solving for the outcome, not the problem. We talked about curiosity, but the third lesson, and this was really important to me, is intellectual humility. And intellectual humility is probably the thing that saved my life in the ICU, because I had this incredible team of doctors, and I'm talking incredible. Like, I was blown away. And my ICU team was about 10 people, because they were trying to solve for the outcome.
Yeah.
But they were curious with each other, and they embraced intellectual humility, because
Amazing.
What happened is, it was an international team, but not everybody was a doctor. Some people were, researchers. Some people were different agents of different kinds, technicians, etc. And they were monitoring about 250 markers on me, like every 5 minutes. So it was a pretty serious thing. But what was amazing is, they were trying to figure out how to solve my case. And the gentleman from Singapore, who was not a doctor, he said, well, we did it this way in Singapore and it seemed to work really well. And then my doctor from here turns around and says, you know what? Tell me more.
Nice.
And it's this understanding that we don't know everything, right? And that we can learn from each other, and to be open to do that, to be open to receiving, really stems from that, I think.
Wow. And just imagine if your doctor had this big ego, and he or she could not have opened themselves up to hearing that.
Yeah.
Your life could be totally different right now.
Yeah. Very different.
Wow. So, I have goosebumps. Even thinking about that.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that I had not only such a wise team, but actually who put their wisdom into action, and you have to understand, like, for a doctor, my parents are both surgeons and specialties. And it is really hard for a doctor to kind of say, I'm not leading the charge.
Yeah. And what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, you spend years just developing the experience and the knowledge, but every situation is different. Right. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we forget that. And that's where that curiosity becomes so important, is because every single individual and every single experience is different. Like it will never, ever be the exact same. And so applying those principles that you're talking about becomes even more important as we're navigating all the many complexities that we navigate.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's been an incredible experience. And if I told you all the incredible stuff that was happening since then, the receiving part will make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, we may have to save that for podcast number 2. But definitely, I mean, I know you're doing so many amazing things. And so a couple of things before we wrap up here. Your book is coming out in April.
It is.
Okay. And do we have a title for that book?
Might, M-I-G-H-T.
Ooh.
So it's a double entendre, meaning might as in power. So the power to solve the impossible. And might as in how might we solve this? So, knowing where you need to go and where nothing seems to work.
Love it.
And that I'll put the link for that book. So if anybody would like to sign up for the pre-sale or be notified.
Yes, please. Like, make sure you put that either in the chat or just send it to me and we'll put it in the show notes so that people have it.
I'll send it to you.
Because when your podcast goes live, it will be, your book will probably be releasing around that same time. So we didn't know that today. Yeah. So that's perfect timing.
Yeah.
Wow. Vandana, like, you are just such an amazing person. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. You've got this great community, What She Said. You've got this TEDx talk that's out there. So, audience, have a listen to her story. And how can people reach you if they have questions or want to just expand on the conversation, or they're curious to know more?
So the best way to reach me is through LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I'm on it all the time. And that's probably where I live the most. It's been a really good platform for me.
Amazing.
So LinkedIn and it's under my name. So, and we'll put it, and we can put it in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. Yes. We'll add the LinkedIn connection there. Oh my gosh. So thank you for being here. I am just so grateful to you. And I know it was a hard journey to go through, but clearly it was meant for you to go through it so that you can share all these incredible learnings with the world. And your will is so strong.
Yeah, I'm a pretty determined person, but I just have to say that, for all the people that might be going through big challenges, people always ask me if I believe that everything happens for a reason, and I don't. But what I do believe is that whatever happens, make sure you give it a purpose. Otherwise, it would have happened in vain, and that would be tragic.
Beautifully said.
You just have to remember that you just have to get on the other side of history. This is just, it's just an event that you have to get through and get over.
Well said. Said. That's great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And audience, thank you. Thank you for chiming in today. Please do share this episode. Let us know if you like our episode. Leave us a rating. That's how we continue to grow. And we're so grateful that you continue to chime in 50 plus countries. So we're grateful to you for that. And as always, you can visit the WIL Empowered website and take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you a lot of insight as to how you're showing up as a leader in this world. So thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Vandana, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.wilempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.